Did Shedeur Sanders tank his NFL draft stock? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss out on a moment of our coverage. Who doesn't love free things? Who doesn't love the NFL draft? And who doesn't love Joe DeLeone? Joe, I appreciate you for hopping on. Joe is the NFL draft insider for A to Z Sports. He does their A to Z film room, and he's got everything we need to know about Shedeur, Travis, and everything that's been happening behind the scenes and the NFL draft combine and all that shenanigans. So, Joe, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
Doing great. Great to reconnect with you, Kevin, and very excited to talk about this because, as we know, Colorado prospects, extremely polarizing. I think that there is a mischaracterization for especially Shedeur Sanders that we need to get into.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys didn't catch that, Joe said reconnect. Joe was actually my internship overseer back in the day. What was that, 4 or 5 years ago now? So
3 years ago?
Okay,
I know.
Yeah,
right. I was gonna say I don't know. Don't make me feel that old, but yeah,
right.
No, it was pretty recent over at Believe when I was a producer over there, and it's always funny. You and I were talking a little bit about career paths before this. It's funny, of course, to see how things have changed.
Yeah, we've both aged gracefully, might I add. Jawline's looking great over there, Joe. You're looking great.
Thank you.
Let's talk about Shedeur though, because his draft stock, I think if you're listening to some people, it doesn't look great. Or at least sort of the consensus of like the combine. And I'll sort of give my synopsis of, or a generalization. The generalization of Shedeur Sanders' combine was he obviously didn't throw, which I said on the show multiple times for about 2 weeks. He didn't gain anything from it. You saw what happened to Will Howard, which granted very different prospects, but Will Howard was slandered and he struggled throwing to guys he never met before, struggled with throwing new footballs. Like, it is what it is. Shedeur doesn't throw, talks to the media. I think he did well talking to the media. He kind of came off very fun, a little sarcastic, a little witty. But all of a sudden, a report from Josina Anderson comes out, and this one team, top 7, they said he was arrogant. They said he was brash. Todd McShay says that he was in these combine interviews not trying, not really caring. Didn't really give examples of like what he was doing. So I feel like that would have been interesting to know. But we're hearing a lot of like Shedeur wasn't doing what he was supposed to. He wasn't being a professional was another thing I heard. What did you hear about the matter?
I think that there's so many different parts of this that like we have to unpack. There's just the general baseline of when we come out of the NFL combine, when there's suddenly a narrative that we didn't have before that maybe isn't related to a legal history with a prospect, that all of a sudden there's something wrong with his character. We have to remember that this is smokescreen season. This is the time in which, coming out of Indianapolis, the teams are going to drive the narrative that there's something wrong with the player that they really want. I think that we need to put that into perspective first and foremost, that could be a big indicator here. I also think that Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders are very deliberate about how they're going about this process. They've said this multiple times, that they want to be able to choose where he goes and plays. If he has a team that he feels the most comfortable with, that he wants to go and play for, he, I believe, took those interviews the most seriously. And it seemed like that when he met with them at East West Shrine and when he met with the Browns at the Combine, that those interviews were fine, that there weren't any issues. I think that if it came off as him being arrogant or not fully engaged in conversations with other teams, I think that is a move and a ploy to try and push away and dissuade other teams that he does not want to play for from taking him. If he ended up sliding, I do not think that this is going to be the case where we pan over to Shedeur Sanders if he's at his home or if he's at the NFL draft and we see a frustrated young man because he's slipping. I think that he is going to be more than content wherever he goes, because this whole process and every action that they take is deliberate, because they have a plan for where they want him to end up.
Yeah, I often compare it, and I totally agree with the deliberate part, because I compare them to LeBron James, the Sanders family, that is, in the sense of, and it hasn't happened this year because obviously the Lakers have been doing well, but in past years, whatever teams LeBron's on, if they're struggling, all of a sudden he's throwing out like random tweets where it's like a little side eye emoji, or it's like a little like distressed emoji, and it's like all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with LeBron? What's wrong with the Lakers? Right? So I think the Sanders family are doing things behind the scenes, right? And I think, what was it, a few months? I think it was in March, or not March, January. Whenever Deion Sanders said that it would be an Eli, I don't remember exactly when it was, but when it would be an Eli in the sense of if there was a team they didn't like, they would try to work their way against it. I think most people assumed that there'd be like this loud production of like Deion Sanders is out here being like, I don't like insert team here, and I don't want Shedeur to go to insert team here. I think they thought it was going to be public, which I think is mistaken, right? Because it was never going to be public. It was going to happen behind the scenes. And I think, like you said, these little subtle moves of like maybe during the interview he's leaning back, or maybe he checked his phone or whatever it is, right? We don't know what it is or what he did, but like maybe there's just small things he did that his advisors were like, hey, this will sort of get this team turned off by you if you just like do this. So
well, and you don't want to. My like biggest part with this that like we need to really study just general human psychology for like why this would come off as such of like, oh, why would some fan base feel, or sorry, not fan base, why a certain team would feel like he was not interested in being disrespectful to them. You have to leave no doubt if you're the Sanders family, if you do not want him to go, say it's to the New York Jets, if you don't want him to be a New York Jet, you need to make it very clear that this is not going to fit. Because as we've seen in the past, a team will still take you. A team will still take you, even if your representation goes to a team and says, man, we really don't want to play for you. Like, we would really be more comfortable playing elsewhere. We don't want to sign. John Elway is the best example of this, where he didn't want to play for the Colts. And they kept telling him, one of the best documentaries that was put out there by ESPN Films was on that draft class. And they literally kept telling him, do not draft us. Please do not draft us. We don't want to go here. And they still took him. So you're trying to create a way for, as these older men that are always feeling like that, you know, they're being disrespected if a player, a young man, is not fully engaged with them. They're always going to be quickly rubbed the wrong way if that conversation doesn't go the way that they want it to. So piss them off in the meeting, turn them away, and then have the really good conversations with the teams that you do want to play for.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice reminder that you just gave us, because the guys who are running these teams are the same guys. If you walk into like a family event with ripped jeans, or like, I could buy you new pants. Like, I could buy you new pants if you're down that bad. It's that same age group, right? So I think the other thing that I thought was interesting about the combine is I feel like we knew something was going to happen with Shedeur, right? It's just they're too polarizing of a family for something to not happen. But now, and we're in NFL mock draft season, which is, there's three different kinds of mock drafts in my eyes. It's guys who are trying to get it correct, guys who maybe are overthinking it. And then there's the mock drafts where it's like, I want to be different. And so a latest mock draft that I saw had Shedeur falling out of the first. And I'm not going to name who it was, because I think we could all go Google it and find it. But realistically, I don't see that happening. I wanted to get your take on it. And my take on it is this quarterback class is terrible, or not as great. So even if Shedeur slapped someone in the face at a meeting, which I doubt he did, highly doubt he did, there would be a team in the first round who needs a quarterback bad enough to be like, well, maybe he had a good reason, right? So talk about Shedeur's stock in these mock drafts where it's like, okay, he's gone now.
Yeah, I think that the complete push of him falling out of the first round, like that I'm not with. And not to actually, I don't mean to actually name, but Trevor Sikkema is the person who put this out with PFF, and I really respect his opinion. And the way that I kind of viewed that as was not him trying to be different or trying to put out the unique take. He, like McShay, was probably given the same information from a team that had communicated that they were rubbed the wrong way. Maybe there was one other team that they were very direct in trying to put off, that they didn't want to go play for that team, that the general reaction would be, oh, this player is going to completely fall out of the first round. Now, a really good example of that is James Pierce Jr., who there's character questions with him of like, is he really bought in? Is he really motivated? Is he a guy that is going to go on to like actually put the effort into trying to become an all-pro, because he has the talent, he just doesn't have the character or the motivation? And there are some teams that say, we're not taking him with the first 64 picks. That is not the same take as all of the other teams. There are plenty of teams that have a culture and that have a foundation that if you took somebody like James Pierce Jr. with character concerns, that they would say, you know, we're going to unlock that, like the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs. So we need to remind ourselves that there's 32 teams. So just because some teams tell us, hey, we're not touching this kid, we don't want to take him, he's completely off our board, which might be the case by some teams that are pissed off by that conversation that they had in the one-on-one meeting with Shedeur Sanders, I find it hard to believe that he completely falls out of the first round. If a slide does occur, the most realistic it would be is like the top 15 picks. Because if he slides past all the quarterback desperate teams that don't feel good, and because they didn't want him to go to a quarterback desperate team with a bad O-line, bad receivers and all that, that somebody in the back end of the first round would be enticed to trade up.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point too, that we look at like these rumors or these what people are told, and I think we all forget that a lot of these guys are talking to similar people. So it's like I don't know who their sources are, but say me and you talk to one team and they both told the same thing. Well, me and you are two different people reporting the same thing because we talk to the same person, right? So I think that's also a nice reminder there too. Before we move on this point, the thing that stood out to me the most about all of this Shedeur, I guess we'll call it drama, if you will, is the fact that they kind of it feels like it's directed at him more than any other quarterback, right? Like he's the only quarterback who didn't throw is what it felt like. Cam Moore didn't throw, right? So I think his name, what comes with it also comes with a lot of inherent backlash just because of the family. And I think once people hear these rumors, they're like, okay, it's time to pile on. Would you agree that there's sort of like a pile on effect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just naturally, we've seen this happen over the last 2 years since Deion Sanders took over Colorado, that the minute that they lose a game, it's like, oh, this didn't work. This is done. This is completely cooked. We can't put any faith in them. And sometimes I've kind of fallen victim to that. Like when they've played badly, I've put in faith and hoped that it was going to work, and then gotten frustrated that it didn't turn out the way that I was hoping for. But there is a demo of people that don't buy into the whole bit and the whole, like the way that they carry themselves and the attention that they garner. I think a lot of people get pissed off by that and don't want to see them succeed. So naturally, the minute that there's an opportunity to be like, Shedeur Sanders is pompous, don't draft him, he's going to fall out of the first round, fans are going to have that reaction. It's just a part of it. And as soon as Shedeur Sanders gets drafted, he is going to carry that same problem wherever he goes. If he has a bad game in his rookie season, all you're going to hear is he's a bust, it was a waste of a pick. And then the minute he starts playing well, you're not going to hear anybody say anything on that side that was being negative.
Yeah, I think people, especially nowadays with social media, we like feed off of negativity, where it's like if there's nothing to be like negative about, it's like I have nothing to say here. But that's just sort of the way society has trended. When we come back, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna be talking about Travis Hunter. Can he play both ways? Is what he's doing harder than what Shohei Ohtani does? We're gonna talk about it all. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person, not a robot, not AI. It's a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. It's me. It's Joe DeLeone. We're talking NFL draft. We're talking mock drafts. And we're talking Travis Hunter because he is, I would say, the most interesting draft prospect of, I feel like, our lifetimes, or at least one of them, because he comes into the draft as a guy who, if I think focused on either position, would probably be the best at both positions. He won the award for being the best player in college football, best receiver, didn't win the best corner award. Shout out to the Thorpe Award. But realistically, he was probably one of the best corners in college football. And there's a huge debate. Can he play both ways? He's been consistent in saying, I want to play both ways. I want to do this. I got some of the feedback that I took away from his comments were, I don't think teams are as open as maybe they had hoped. He said he'd interviewed as a receiver, some as a corner. What do you make of the matter?
I think that, well, first of all, he's not going to play both positions. He's not. It is too hard. It's not like baseball. It is too hard, not from a physical standpoint, like if he can play and withstand that many hits through that many games, which is already a challenge. How hard it would be for him to prepare for a game with the amount of preparation that is required with film, with team meetings, offensive meetings, position group meetings, defensive meetings, like he would have to attend and be a part of so many different things in order to get caught up to be on the level of prepared for a game. This isn't college. He would need to be able to do something that's impossible. He needs to make a decision. I think NFL teams are going to make a decision. I think he's going to contribute at both. I think that there are going to be teams that see the value of deploying him to play both things. To me, he's a cornerback because he has this rare length and this rare range and also instincts and ball skills to close down on the ball when it's in the air. Some of the plays that he's made are just unbelievable. And to me, he's the best corner prospect in this class. He can be a good receiver in the NFL. And I think that ultimately it is hard to find elite corners like what Travis Hunter could be if he focused most of his attention on that compared to what it is to find contributing productive receivers. There are receivers in the NFL that go on unexpectedly to be 900-yard, 1,000-yard guys simply because of the scheme that they're playing in and the quarterback that's throwing to them. We see it happen all the time. They go to a different team, they disappear. You can get production out of Travis Hunter by deploying him in specific situations, have specific sub packages every other series, just in a smaller role. It is totally doable. Have him run a limited route tree, all of those things. But to me, I think ultimately he's going to be a cornerback in the NFL.
Interesting. Okay. See, if I was Travis Hunter, and this is from a different approach, I would want to play receiver in the sense that they get paid more.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like your career could be sorry, I had like a little star there. Your career could be a little bit longer as a receiver, in the sense that you're the one sort of controlling things, right? We've seen aging receivers do well. Larry Fitzgerald, I feel like Tyler Lockett is getting up there in age. And then also you don't have to run backwards with the fastest athletes in the sport. So I also think that's a plus. The thing that I have the biggest sort of hesitation with Travis playing both ways, because people get on us, Joe. Every time we talk about this, they're like, he could do it. He says he wants to. And it's like, I get that, right? I wanted to go to space. I haven't been. Maybe one day. But realistically, there's going to come a point, and I think whoever drafts him will probably let him try it first. I think there's going to be like this trial and error period where it's like, okay, you want to play both ways? Okay, here's your meetings from 8 to 5, plus we have practice at 6. Or here's this, and this. Here's the playbook for this. And I think Travis Hunter is a smart enough kid, athletic enough guy to figure it out. I don't think teams are going to want a key player like Travis being limited by a snap count, right? Because if you draft him, we'll say 5th overall, and all of a sudden at 5th overall, we have a top 5 pick who, I don't know if people realize this, but I think it's picks 1 through 7, or we'll go 1 through 10 are all making 25 million plus, right? So they're going to pay him 25 million to be a part-time player at 2 positions, which doesn't really add up to being a full-time player because you're not getting the best out of him at both or the most out of him. So I think the NFL team who drafts him, they're going to let him try it. They're going to experiment with it. And then at the end of the day, I think they're going to decide, we want you to do this. And I think it's probably going to be the more cost-efficient option, which is to be corner. Because I like to go back to, and this is a little bit different, but the Jimmy Graham situation when he was with the Saints, when he felt he was more receiver-like, but obviously the tight ends were much cheaper. The Saints were like, you're a tight end to us. We're going to pay you as a tight end, right? So do you think financials will come into play in this decision as well?
I actually don't think that it will. And the reason why is that by the time his first contract is up and available, say he's playing corner, and corners get paid slightly less than the best receivers in the NFL. I do think up until that point, he's probably going to get the opportunity to play some receiver. To the percentage and the degree, we'll end up finding out in the first 5 years of his career in the NFL. But I think that it's still going to be impossible for the team that's negotiating with him and his representation to be able to say, like, hey, you're only worth this to us playing corner. He is the most marketable and will be the most marketable player in the NFL within a couple of years. He is extremely likable. I outside of football is a streamer and is very well respected and gets a ton of attention paid to him by younger audiences. Whichever franchise he lands with, he's providing value on and off the field, which almost no prospects in this class can say. Like it is just it's a phenomenon. Everything that he's done is a phenomenon. So even though he might end up being moved to corner and they let him play receiver X amount of series per game, the argument that they're going to be able to say is, all right, if you're not going to pay us, you're missing out on all this opportunity to grow your franchise's brand even more and to constantly be driving the conversation for the sport. We're going to go elsewhere to a team that's willing to pay us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Honestly, that reminded me of sort of the Shedeur thing we talked about earlier. I forgot to mention the coach that said that about Shedeur didn't like that he had money and sort of fame coming into this draft. Yeah. And that's crazy to me because it's like, not only are you drafting who you hope are top talents, but you're drafting investments that can be the face of a franchise. And I think it's harder to find two guys than Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter who'd be great faces of the franchise in terms of popularity. Right. Final note on Travis before we move on. Do you think that in this process, he decides for himself, like, I want to do this, right? He said throughout the entire time that he wants to play both ways. Do you think there's a realization, and what do you think that realization would be?
Yeah, I think he's not going to have control over this. Like, sadly, like I know that football fans that love Travis Hunter are going to think like, oh, he gets the set. No, you don't. Whatever your head coach is going to tell you to do, that's what you're going to end up doing. And I don't think Travis Hunter is stubborn like that. Like, I think he is a team player. I think that if he goes to the Patriots, and Mike Vrabel tells him, hey man, we think you're great. We think you're a great player, but we need you to play corner for us. We think that you're going to be a great corner. We'll let you play some receiver, but we need to get the most out of you. We don't want you to get hurt. We want you to be focused and prepared for games, and we want you to be able to do it the best degree. I think that he is the type of young man that would understand that. I think that even though he keeps pushing this narrative that like, hey, I'm going to try and play both, I think he's smart enough to understand that he's not going to be able to do both full time, that there is eventually going to be some sort of stopping point that whichever front office or head coach takes him is going to put that parameter over him. And I don't like to wish injury on players, but if he does end up playing both and he does eventually get hurt, that's where the decision's going to be made. It's basically Shohei Ohtani, where he still tries to do both, but whenever he messes up his elbow, he's only hitting. He can't, he's only a DH. So the injury gets in the way, and it's almost making that decision for him.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, when there was a few interviews where Travis was talking at the combine and just the wording that he was using, it seemed like teams weren't as open to the idea. And it felt like he was kind of getting that. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but there was just certain comments that he made where I was like, I don't think he was getting the feedback he wanted to play both ways. You mentioned the Shohei thing. I'll give you my quick take on it. I think physically playing both ways like Travis Hunter did at the college level, if he could do that at the NFL level, that would be more difficult than what Shohei does in the baseball world. That being said, I think baseball is a more difficult sport in terms of hitting a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. No, that's where the kind of the balance between the two of comparing the two is like, oh, it's a million times harder to be, to try and play baseball and to be able to hit a ball that fast. And then like the football side is like the wear and tear is where it comes into play.
Yeah, so I don't know if we'll ever settle on debate. Travis would like literally have to be the best player at receiver and corner, play full time, and then it would be like comparable. But until we get that, we'll just have to wait and see. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the best landing spots for both Shedeur and Travis. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. It's me, it's Joe. We're talking about the NFL draft order. Where do we see Shedeur and Travis falling? Because obviously they're polarizing prospects. They are, I would say, the headliners of this class. This class doesn't feel like it has as much star power as classes before this, which I think having two guys who played for Deion Sanders, one of them his son, really helps boost the ratings. But it'll be interesting. Only one of them is going to be in Green Bay, I believe. Travis made it seem like he'd go. Shedeur's not going to go. He already said that. So we'll see how that turns out. We like to do this exercise on Locked On Buffs, Joe, where I run you through the top, we'll say 15 picks, because I think we both agree that they're going to go somewhere in there. And you just tell me when to stop. And once I get to that team where you're like, yeah, that's a fit, we'll talk about it. So starting with Travis, since we were just talking about him, this is the draft order. We have the Tennessee Titans at 1, Cleveland Browns at 2, New York Giants at 3, New England Patriots at 4, Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, we're stopping at the Patriots. Okay,
yeah, I
let's talk
think
about it.
when we look at the top of the draft, first of all, just to quickly address, I think somebody's going to trade up first overall to take Cam Ward. I think it's going to probably be the Giants. No, at number 2, the Browns really need a quarterback, and they're interested in taking a quarterback this year. So I think we'll get to that in a second. At third overall, if Abdul Carter's still on the board and Tennessee moves back to 3, they're taking Abdul Carter. They need a pass rusher, and they're not going to pass up somebody as just freakish, as athletic as he is. I love the idea of him going to the Patriots because they need receiver help. They need another corner to play opposite of Christian Gonzalez. Travis Hunter doesn't need to step in right away and be a full-time corner, and he doesn't need to be a full-time receiver as they're trying to figure this out. And Mike Vrabel is a guy who's going to love players who want to contribute and be a team-first player. And more importantly, he also played a little bit of goal line tight end back in the day for the Patriots. So that conversation seems pretty easy.
Yeah, I was hitting on that. Vrabel was technically a two-way guy. It's funny if you look up the best two-way players in NFL history, like the list is like, I don't want to say depressing, but it's like it just shows that no one does it because he's like number 3 all time. It's like it'll be like him, JJ Watt, those 5 minutes. Patrick Peterson did it a little bit. Like it's not a lot. It's not frequent. So
no.
That was interesting to me because I tried to do a little research on it. I was like, oh, it's just like little gimmick packages here and there where it's like, yeah, Mike Vrabel's huge. We're going to throw him over here. Booger McFarland was another guy who I think dabbled in both eventually or at one point. Okay, with Shedeur Sanders, we're going to go in reverse order. Starting with number 10, the Chicago Bears. Number 9, the New Orleans Saints. Sleeper team for me if they didn't have the Derek Carr contract stuff. Carolina Panthers at 8, Jets at 7, Raiders at 6, Jacksonville.
We're going in reverse order, kind of. So there's two teams that I think that make the most sense. First, let's talk about the Raiders. They need a restart. They need to figure out what direction they're going in. They just released Gardner Minshew. They don't have an option. I think that with Pete Carroll and his age, you need to start this thing now. You need to trigger this thing now. You need to maybe even trade up to go and get Shedeur Sanders. And also, we even saw during the season, there was the speculation on which team it was that he was referring to, but like he kept tweeting, what was it, thank God or something like that. Every single time the Raiders were losing, some people thought it was the Giants that he was doing this for. I think that the Raiders are one of the teams that he wants to play for. It is a great market. It's a great city for him to live in. It's a team that gets to build and mold the roster around him. That one makes a lot of sense. But I don't think he's going to make it past 2. Like I really think that the more that it makes sense, as long as the Titans move back and the Giants move up, and Cam Ward is off the board with the first overall pick, I really think that the Cleveland Browns are in such an awful situation with the Deshaun Watson contract. If they get rid of him, they're eating a ton of dead money. They need a cheap option for the next 4 years when they're eating that money. They need a cheap option at quarterback, and they need to start doing it now. Having stopgap free agents for a long period of time is just going to make this team get worse and worse and more undesirable. So if you take Shedeur Sanders, you're not going to be able to spend a ton of money around him. If you traded Myles Garrett and got some extra draft capital and cleared up space there, you're able to build something strong around Shedeur, and also you have a cheap quarterback option instead of a massive deal. Then once Watson's off the books, and if everything goes according to plan, you give Shedeur Sanders his second contract, which should be a pretty big number. And then the last part with that, the fit makes a lot of sense for the offense. Kevin Stefanski, the way that he sets up and utilizes the run game for quarterback success, where timing is really important for their offense. I think that Shedeur Sanders' accuracy is perfect for that.
Yeah, I think he doesn't get as much credit for being as accurate, and he has a really high IQ. I think these days it's like, can he run 20 yards to the right and throw it sidearm and dive? And they can't. It's like, he's not that good, right? It's like there's still room for, because I remember it was a couple weeks ago. So I forgot who it was. There was a criticism against Shedeur. Oh, it was Mel Kiper Jr., excuse me. He was told by an NFL team that NFL teams don't want quarterbacks like Shedeur anymore. They want guys like Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes. And I was like, yeah, don't we all, right? Don't we all want to be
guys are once every 3-4 years sometimes. Yeah. It's hard to come by those prospects.
Don't we all want to be 6'5", ripped and handsome? Like everyone's dream. But realistically, if you look around the league, there's a lot more quarterbacks that look like Shedeur that can, because he's mobile enough, right? He moves around in the pocket. I think he took a few too many sacks in Boulder, but at Jackson State, he ran a little bit more. So he can run a little. He's not Lamar by any means. He's not Josh Allen, but he can move a little. And I think people are underestimating that everyone wants a Mahomes or a Josh Allen, but there's not a lot of those to go around. And so the league is still very much centered around quarterbacks who can make smart decisions, operate in the play action, and lead a team. So what do you think, before we go, what is the team getting in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter?
With Shedeur, you're getting a accurate and consistent and poised great leader. All you hear about, and this is, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, it's like all you hear about this kid before the draft was that his character is amazing, that he's a great leader, that his teammates love him. You would get somebody that I think knows how to lead a locker room and is brilliant enough to know how to use his intelligence to help him win on the field. And with Travis Hunter, you're getting a cultural phenomenon, a football phenomenon. You're getting a guy that is going to draw so much attention to your team, as well as make impactful plays on both sides of the football. Both these guys, I think, are going to be tremendous pros. And I'm a little bit, frankly, sick of seeing so much negativity go towards both these prospects, because I think both are going to be great.
Yeah, I think if they went to different schools, everyone would love them. But here's where we are. It's just how life goes. This has been another episode of Locked on Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Joe, tell the people where they could find you, what you're working on.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, and also the A to Z Film Room on YouTube. We just went over 40,000 subs, and we're doing quick breakdowns, reactions to headlines, as well as prospect scouting reports. So go check that out on YouTube. Kevin, appreciate it, and I'm glad that we got to catch up today.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun. Go check out his work, because the draft is in about a month. I think it's April 24th is the date. So there's a lot of things that's going to be said, a lot of things that will happen in between then. So you guys won't want to miss it. Appreciate you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.